Greetings, fanboys and fangirls. Jared here with another review from Fanboys Forever. Today we're going to be having a look at the Ninja Turtles The Last Ronin figure. Now, this isn't a NECA figure as you might expect, but this is actually the Playmates figure. This was a previews exclusive limited edition figure, and basically that just means that it was available for comic shops to order. You can also find it at places like Big Bad Toy Store online. This figure costs right around the $30 mark depending on where you get it, and there's also a limited number of the black and white versions that are out there, so if that's more your thing. I was always more interested in the color version. Of course, we do want to remind you to please go ahead and subscribe and like the video and do a backflip, whatever it takes to get that YouTube algorithm to recognize the channel. We really do appreciate that, and it really does help us out. With all that fantastic stuff out of the way, let's just go ahead and have a look at this mystery turtle. Anybody who's familiar with the Last Ronin story that's been going the last couple of years, was completed a little while back, will know that this is a story that's kind of like the Dark Knight Returns of Ninja Turtles. It is an extremely dark story. It's definitely one that's aimed towards older audiences. I can't really say too much about it, right, without giving away a lot. You might notice there's only one turtle here, and you might also notice that this turtle includes the weapons of all four Ninja Turtles. Well, all the Ninja Turtles are gone except for this one. So let's go ahead and look at the packaging a little bit. I really like the dedication to making sure that we have the comic book art on the top and the bottom, and just the packaging design is incredibly fetching. You see how this is like die cut right here to where it looks like this has been ripped. It's kind of an asymmetrical look. It's really great. It kind of elevates it above something like a black box like the Star Wars Black Series packaging or something like that. It's also a great way to just showcase the figure and the accessories just all around it, and it's a really nice kind of showpiece packaging. On the side we have more of that lovely comic art, and then on the back we have yet again another shot. We also have a little summary here of the comic story, so if you want to check that out. And on the side, more of the artwork just stretches around, the Last Ronin, and the UPC code in case this helps your comic book store or your shop locate this to order 14 and up. So definitely this is Playmates going for a market they usually don't go for. All right, let's go ahead and get them out. In case anyone is interested, yes, this is pretty collector-friendly packaging here. All you have to do is take a couple of strips of tape off. There's a little tab at the top. Then, smooth sailing. And here he is out of the packaging, the Last Ronin. Now, of course, a Ronin is a samurai who wanders without a master. That is the situation that this turtle finds himself in, forced to go on a lone revenge mission many years after the tragic events that the comic explains in great detail through a series of flashbacks. And if you haven't read it, I highly encourage you to do so. Special thanks to my friend TJ for letting me read the comic. This figure does come as something of a surprise. We know that over the years that Playmates has definitely had their fair share of ups and downs when it comes to the Ninja Turtles license. In particular lately, it just seems like a lot of their releases are regurgitated reuses again and again and again of those Ninja Turtles classics bodies from 15 years ago or so. It just seems like they keep going and going with those without ever making very meaningful improvements to them. But I'm happy to say that here Playmates has actually taken some initiative and done something that is 100% new. There is no kind of reuse here. This is a completely original product. This is their own interpretation of the Last Ronin comic book artwork, and definitely a way for them to have sort of an original toy version of the Last Ronin. If you're not sure what I mean, it'll become clear to you as we do some comparisons, particularly with the NECA figures, because this guy is not the height of the NECA figures, nor is he the height of the Ninja Turtles Classics figures, which means he's going way more with those original Turtles figures. With the expanded articulation, this kind of makes me wonder, are we looking at the start of maybe something like an Origins line, like Mattel does for Masters of the Universe? Could Playmates be going that same direction? I'm thinking this might be a preview into the future if this does well. And the truth is, I think a lot of people are enjoying this. I think visually, this really does a good job of taking the Last Ronin design, using the classic proportions of the old Ninja Turtles figures, It's as if the old Turtles figures were still going to this day, as if in the old cartoon series had finally gotten to this storyline, and this is the figure that came out. And so it's a real cool idea that this even happened, and it's a really interesting reversal for Playmates to be like, hey, I mean, let's be realistic. We are not NECA. We're just not that kind of company. The more we try to directly compete, then we're just going to come out looking bad. So why not do this, where we're going to actually do something we're familiar with? This is what our company does, and we're going to do our own thing. That's what I think they should have been doing this whole time, play to their strengths. So I'm very excited. Looking at the head sculpt, this turtle's wearing a black mask, which is accurate to the comics, and a hood. And this is where the artwork varies. Sometimes you'll see the hood has a point right here in the middle, and some of the artwork featured just this smooth look. They went with the smooth look, and some of the art on this box has a point. I think it's just depending on what you're looking at. I think he looks great the way he is. It's not a big deal for me. The other thing about the head sculpt is some of the paint application is very, very sloppy. I want you to look under the nose or the snout of the turtle here, and you can see that there's some really weird stuff happening. And I've seen other people's have some really weird stuff happening right here as well, almost as if they've literally taken a brush and just brushed it on and said, okay, good enough. I know that some of this is intentional, especially up here around the brow area. Like, that's definitely intentional, where it has like a speckling almost. And some of this, yeah, I'm sure that some of it is as well, like this dark spot here that gives such great accent into these bends. But this can't be intentional, where there's just no paint here. And I think I have a way to maybe remedy that or make it slightly less noticeable, which I'm going to employ in just a moment. You can see that the same kind of effect is going on the chin down here, but it's a little more rational, almost as if this side is in shadow and this side isn't. You can also see that this version of The Last Ronin has his special goggles right around his neck like a necklace. Then of course he has these big shoulder pads right here. You can also see that the gi that he is wearing and the robes all intact, and I love how he's got those squat proportions of the old Turtles cartoon. He's not necessarily as hulking as the character that we see in the actual book. You can also see all of his accessories, how they have all kinds of great paint hits and washes going over them, and we'll get more into those as we get into the accessory portion. We have pouches on the utility belt here, and he even has samurai-esque gauntlets that have some metal accents and things, and some gloves that he's wearing. Now, what's interesting is I think that maybe these gloves are supposed to be open-fingered right here, and you're supposed to see, you know, this green right here on the fingers, but they didn't do that. It's just this kind of off gray color, and I think that does decrease the quality of the visual a little bit. So they did skimp a little on that area. I do think the head sculpt looks best when you have the hood forward like this and the chin up, and it puts him into shadow, which is, I think, how the character is really supposed to look. When you put his head down like this and the hood goes back, he's, you know, that's its own look, but it's a little 80s Playmates Turtle-esque, maybe a little too much. Instead, I like keeping the mystery right there of The Last Ronin because it just feels more accurate to the comic. Of course, this turtle wears sandals almost with just open-toed, and I really do appreciate the paint application here. They could have cheaped out there, but they didn't. Of course, they shouldn't for the price point. And on the back, that paint does continue, which is a nice touch as well. You have to keep in mind that Playmates usually would be the company that wouldn't paint things in the back. But once again, this is very much a special release and isn't like their mass market kind of stuff that they would usually do. Now, before we get into anything else, I'm going to try something. It could be a complete failure. I may end up warning you not to do it. We'll definitely see. So I do have a little bit of Tamiya paint thinner. Never tried this stuff before, but I do want to try it on some of this unevenness right here. You see, this head is not painted green, all right? This is just the color of the plastic. You can tell because if you look down here at the head sculpt, you can just see that's just green plastic. That's not paint. Everything is painted on top of the green plastic. So my goal would be to go in and take away some of this splotchiness and make it a little bit more of an even finish. So what I'm going to do, and having a Q-tip I think would probably be even better, but I have just an end of a paper towel. I'm just simply going to roll it to a little point like this, just dip it into the paint thinner, and just enough to where this has just been soaked barely. And let's see what happens. Let's try on the nose here. So you can see that a little bit of the black is starting to come off. And here's what we end up with the finished product. Now look, your figure is your figure, so you have to make the right decision for yours. But for me, that kind of mushy looking, just slapdash paint application that they had on the nose was really holding this figure back. I had to work for about 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes, just to kind of scrub a little bit. The good thing about this paint thinner is if you're just using a little bit on a paper towel, it takes a lot of force and a lot of time to scrub it off. You may think that's bad, but it's really not. Instead, it gives you the chance to slowly work away the parts of the paint that you don't want and to reveal the plastic color down below. And in this case, this was very good because it gave me a really great amount of control. As you can see, we kept all of this right below the eyes on the bandana. Now what this allows you to do is, like I said earlier, the way that I want to display my figure is to have his head up in the hood, and this is a natural shadow now falling as a result of the hood, and it just kind of highlights it more. There really shouldn't be a whole lot of grime on his nose. It just kind of looks like he's dirty or needs to blow his nose or something. So this is what I like. Like I said, you do you, and I've seen some that has a lot more weird stuff going on the nose. I just wanted to show you in case you wanted to correct it like I wanted to correct it. All right, getting back to the figure, just be aware that, you know, I have altered it from here on out, and we did get a good look at it before it was altered. Do know that that was something that I consider sloppy paint for a figure that's probably priced at a point to where it shouldn't have a bunch of sloppiness. Looking at the costume, not only is the costume itself cool, but there is a huge amount of weapon storage. You can see that we have storage for one of Raphael's sais right here. You can see that we also have storage for this grappling hook. And what's great is that they leave you enough grappling hook to where if you wanted to, yes, you can place the hook right into his hands here. And I do appreciate that. They did intentionally leave just enough room so that his hand could grasp it, which is wonderful. Not only that, but we can put that right back on, and we have room for another sai back here. We have room for one of Leonardo's katanas, and it's a little warped. Definitely need to use some hot water on that to straighten it back out, and then cold water to lock it back in. And then we have a large compartment for Donatello's bow staff, and it is very, very tight in there. As a matter of fact, I think it was so tight that I might have rubbed off a little bit of the silver paint right here. We'll just say that that was some damage that's been done, so just be aware of that. Now, the one funny thing is, unless I'm missing something, that means that Michelangelo's nunchucks don't really have a comfortable or obvious place to go. And so that's a little weird for me. I suppose that their idea is maybe you'll have these in his hands and the rest are stored, but I think they missed a trick, making sure that there was storage for every single set of the turtle's old weapons. Speaking of weapons, we do have some shurikens and throwing stars right here. You get 2 of each variety. You have throwing stars here. You have the little blades or shurikens or whatever you want to call them right there. And you just get an extra 1 of each. There's no place to put those, but you wouldn't necessarily expect those to have a spot. You also get Leonardo's broken katana right here. Here on the belt, you see how you can rotate this around? This is really cool. This means that you can kind of change the angle of, say, the sai. So if I put it in like that, you can also angle it around a little bit to keep it out of the way of certain things. You can kind of adjust it as needed. So I really do like that, and this probably looks a lot better than what I had it in earlier. Over here, you can see that we have another one of those that rotates. And again, you can kind of angle it to make sure that it's staying as clear as it can of the sword and the bow staff. And it looks a lot more natural than the way that I had it earlier. It's little touches like that that really show that this is a different sort of product than the ones that Playmates usually gives us. And definitely they're headed in a better direction. Just to show you that he can, here he is with the bow staffs. He can also wield the katana. Katana seems a little short, but it is in line with the kinds of katanas that we would see in the original line. And here he is wielding one of the sais. And just to show you, yes, he can use that as well. The hands aren't really going to be grasping the throwing stars or the shurikens. You might be able to get creative and sort of work them between fingers, and you can actually get some decent poses that way. So I do appreciate that. I don't know if it was intentional, but there's certainly a way to have him wield these weapons. All right, so I know that this is a category coming up that a lot of people are going to be interested in, and that's articulation. So let me get the nunchucks out of his hand here. Ah, fellow chucker, eh? Anyway, so with the head, I think that there's probably a way to pop it off if you heated it up, but I just don't care enough to do that. Instead, I'll show you that it can go down that much. It can go up that much. I'm sure you can work a little bit of side-to-side magic in there if you need to. It can turn left and right. You can go there. You can only do so much that the hood will make look reasonable, because beyond that, you want him to be able to look through the hood. Now you can kind of reposition this floating piece here and kind of give you some leeway, but you can see where that's just stopping, and there's not a really good way, unless you can wrench that head off of there, to get this piece off necessarily. I just feel like something's stopping it, so it's not something I want to try. I don't want to ruin my figure, of course. I have been known to do that out of curiosity every now and then. There's a fantastic hinge, and it can go straight up like this. You can bring it all the way around. He also, believe it or not, has highly effective double jointed elbows. I mean, like, really effective. I think that this is like one of the best engineered elbow joints I've seen in a long time. I mean, look at that, how you can go from straight extended out to, I mean, just as deep an elbow bend as you possibly can. So I really like that. Down here, we do have rotation at the wrist, and you can see the hinge in there, and it works out very well. You can get some very tight interior hinging and some pretty good out. It's also worth noting what's not here. It may look like it right here, but I can promise you there's no rotation at the bicep. Instead, all the rotation you're seeing here is just happening at the shoulder joint itself. There's no rotation down here either. The legs down here, you can see that they're just on a ball joint system. That means that you don't get any more than this when it comes to splits. And that's okay. I don't necessarily see the last Ronin doing the splits all over the place. This is an old turtle, all right. You can also see that you get a pretty decent outwards kick, probably about what you would get with the NECA figure that's all geared up. Now, once again, you don't get any kind of rotation here. There's no cut at the thigh. There's no swivel here at the knee, and that's a real shame because that would take it to the next level. However, once again, we do get a wonderful double joint with lots and lots of range. Now, we also get a pretty decent ankle hinge, but what we really don't get, even though we get rotation, you're not really going to see a real pivot down here. And it's a shame, because with this rotation, that means that if it were just done a little different, it could have had ankle hinge pretty easily. Again, Playmates is just not the company that's their strong suit or anything like that, while still focusing on what makes them them and offering fans something that other companies can't, which in this case is a toyetic kind of version of the last Ronin, something that goes with your original collection. So even though I'm really satisfied overall with the figure, there are definitely a few areas where they could have improved. One of them was offering some sort of display stand. As you can see, there's holes in the bottoms of the feet here, and it just seems like it would have been perfect to have at least given him a sewer lid or something. It also would have been nice to have actually seen the fingers painted. But once again, this is one of those deals where if you look at the art for the last Ronin, some of the art, it seems like he's just wearing black gloves, yet the sculpt here is showing more that he's got exposed fingers. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. Because the last Ronin is kind of a new character, it's one of those things where visually he's going to be in flux for a little while, and it's a little harder because it's an independent comic to lock down what the actual definitive look is. So there are some things like the hood peak that are kind of fluctuating right now. I'm not sure if there's a consensus. Of course, if there was any kind of important knowledge you could take away with you from this review, it would definitely be the scale. It's so important that anyone who's interested in this figure does have some modicum of understanding about the scale. If you have a look, this is definitely measured out to be the scale of the original figures. You may think, well, he seems a little taller than the original Michelangelo. That is only because this Michelangelo is kind of sprawled out into a wide stance. If you do the same thing to the last Ronin, it's a little harder to get him into a deeper pose, but you can definitely tell that they're practically the same height. Even movie 3, Turtles in Time, whatever you want to call it, it's practically the same thing. So yeah, it's kind of cool. I do appreciate that. That means that there are some figures like the 2003 reboot that aren't going to work quite as well, that are a little too tall, like when they did the Fast Forward. I've always been kind of partial to that Splinter from Fast Forward. He always had a lot better sculpting, and I've always liked using him just as like comic Splinter, and thankfully it's not so bad. I mean, especially when you stand the last Ronin up like this, they're pretty much eye to eye. Splinter's still a little big. Of course, since this is a future story, I know how important it is for Serling to be in scale with the last Ronin, and I'm here to tell you that because this figure is smaller than the Fast Forward figures, Serling's scale is actually accurate here. And just in case April was a big part of the last Ronin story, here she is, the 2003 figure, which is actually a really good height difference. Of course, you can't forget old Scruffy right here. Scruffy looks great with the last Ronin, like Elvis in Blue Hawaii. Don't worry, fanboys and fangirls. Here on Fanboys Forever, we provide the answers to the questions that you stay awake at night wondering about. And I'm happy to tell you that yes, he can ride the motorcycle, no problem. Now look, being a person of great taste, I can tell you that the Megan Fox April is the one. I mean, scale-wise, yeah, it sort of works. So you could use some of those old movie figures. Yeah, here's the thing you can do. Here's one of the turtles that was based on the 2012 CGI episode where stuff went down. And if you've not seen this, you may not realize that they did an episode of that show that's about as dark as The Last Ronin, several years before The Last Ronin. So you might want to look at this. I'm just putting it out there. This is not just a funny variant. Yeah, watch that episode. You may not remember the time when The Last Ronin went to outer space with teenage April, but you know, it happened. Or how about the time you had to track down some of the Universal Monster Turtles? That's a thing. And look, you may not like it, dude, but Peter Laird said it was canon. I mean, there's probably about 1 million more goofy side gags I could probably do with this guy, but I think you get the idea. This is a cool figure, especially if you're like me and you have, I don't know, about 1 billion different Ninja Turtles figures lying around from the classic Playmates series over the years. This is definitely something you'll want to have because he fits right in with those guys, and as you can see, they went to great pains to make sure that he was pretty much the exact same scale. So good for them. Really cool idea. And so I know that my audience, we're kind of, Masters of the Universe nuts. And so this review may just be a detour for us. But as you can see, you can put him in with Masters of the Universe Origins, but they're quite a bit bigger than this Turtles figure. However, this is pretty much the exact perfect scale for He-Man. Because, of course, if you think about it, He-Man's probably like, what, 6'5" at the very least, 7 feet tall, and the Turtles are supposed to be 4 feet tall, or 4.5, depending on the continuity. I think the last Ronin is a little larger, as if he's maybe mutated over time. So I think this is about the right scale for them. So yeah, I mean, yeah, you can put them in Origins, sure. And it's very important to me that this review makes it abundantly clear about the scale. I don't want anybody to walk away from this thing being even slightly confused about the size of this. Just remember, this is meant to be more of a companion piece to those original Turtles figures. And if for some reason you do want to bring in some villains from that larger scale, you can try some methods to kind of fudge it in photography, and it works fine. And given the amount of Turtles figures we've had lately, You can pretty much knock yourself out with the craziest stuff imaginable. And there we have it. That was the Playmates version of The Last Ronin. And of course, if you haven't had a chance to read this story yet, then I highly suggest it. Chances are, though, if you're watching this review, I have a feeling you probably already read the story and you know what kind of quality we're talking about. Of course, this is a great way to commemorate that story, but it's not exactly the same thing as buying a NECA. But I can honestly tell you that rather than being a competitor to that, it really very much is its own thing. However, I still feel, even though this is a previews exclusive item, that this is an overpriced figure. I believe that it would be a much easier pill to swallow at $20 to $25, especially considering this figure is about 4.5 inches tall. The sad truth is, it's almost impossible to justify that $30 price tag. However, it definitely is a step up from what we usually see Playmates release, and is definitely them moving in the right direction, even if you have to clean a little paint up yourself. Either way, I was really pleased with this release, and for a die-hard Turtles fan like me, it really ticked all of the boxes. You might be wondering, if you could only buy one, which one should you get? Well, I do not yet have the NECA version of The Last Ronin. However, I can tell you just by looking at it that it is more accurate to most of the comic art. However, that's not what this figure is necessarily trying to do. It's more of a melding together of the original Turtles action figures along with that comics art to get something wholly unique to Playmates, and something that really only they could do. With that in mind, it's really a question of what you're looking for. Are you looking for a companion piece that may go well with the rest of your Playmates Turtles collection? Or are you looking for the most comics accurate figure possible? Chances are, if it's accuracy you're looking for, then you'll probably be better off going with the NECA. However, this is a figure that would go perfectly with any retro collection and is also incredibly durable. Since it was made by Playmates, it does have a lot of the durability and toughness that you might expect from a mass market release that was actually intended for kids. So even if he doesn't exactly have all the articulation points that we would love, especially something like a rocker ankle pivot and something like a swivel at the bicep or the thigh, this guy still has it where it counts in terms of articulation and still does what he needs to. Either way, he's a lot of fun, and I certainly think that old school collectors like me will have this guy on their radar. Don't count it out just because it's maybe not quite as detailed, ornate, or accurate as that NECA release. Even though it is overpriced, this is still a special figure, because who would have imagined that Playmates would have been working on a retro-styled Last Ronin figure? Certainly not me. Let's just hope that Playmates takes this a step further, as we hopefully will see more releases from them that is in more of a Turtles origins style, if you will, much like Mattel's Masters of the Universe. Just make sure that you do your due diligence and definitely look this figure up and understand that this is not in a 6 to 7 inch scale, as many collectors aimed releases for Turtles have been in the last few years. Although it's an overpriced niche item, I still got a big kick out of this. I'm definitely one of the people who will probably end up grabbing this and the NECA release. Well friends, if you've enjoyed the review today, then be sure to like and subscribe and do all those wonderful things that helps the algorithm to discover our little channel. Also, be sure to comment down below and let me know what you think about this release. Were you pleasantly surprised like me? Or will you be steering clear of this one, exclusively looking for the NECA release instead? And with all that out of the way, as always, God bless you and yours, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Fanboy out.